As we approached the 1-year anniversary of the wildlife pond, I began to reflect on all of the different species that have visited the pond so far, and in this episode I wanted to share with you all my experiences in witnessing nature firsthand around the pond. So welcome back to part 3 of my wildlife pond series. So in the last episode, we saw these broad-bodied chaser dragonflies call the pond home. Wow, try saying that 3 times. And we saw this family of blackbirds which actually fed their young at the pond. They then continued to stay at the pond, and I watched them bathing in the evenings and flying around in the nearby trees. We then saw a few of my favourite birds to see at the pond. Different finches. This is a greenfinch and this is a chaffinch. And although cool to see, they weren't always the easiest to film. Another difficult species to film was actually the resident newts that live within the pond. You can see them here just below the surface, hiding beneath the lily pads. This is a favourite spot of theirs, and when the weather's nice and warm, you'll often see their tails sticking out from under those big leaves. Now, they may have proved to be quite elusive so far, but I do have a plan for filming them in the future, so subscribe to see it in the future, and leave a comment down below, let me know what you'd like to see. Now I will say, some birds have been much easier to see and film around the pond. Just like this common wood pigeon, although not everybody's favourite bird, they're actually kind of pretty, well, maybe not. But yeah, they have a look, and they're easy to film, which is always nice. Now speaking of pretty, the robin has always been a favourite of mine, and check out this cute little baby. Aww. I'll come back to him shortly, but for right now, let's take a trip back to earlier on in the year when I saw a species that I have never seen in my garden before. So way back in winter, after the snow had finally melted, the pond was looking a little bare and a little barren, but one day I happened to see this, a grey wagtail. Now, I've seen them around in local areas to where I live, but I have never seen them in my garden before. This was a complete first, and I know that it was purely due to the fact that I had built this wildlife pond. In fact, I was so shocked to see them that I tried my best to photograph them in and around the pond, but as you can see, the photos really weren't the best. However, I was pleased to see that the trail camera actually picked up this one grey wagtail walking around and foraging at the pond. Really great sight. And I've been waiting to see them more in the future, but sadly, I haven't had any luck. And another species that only my trail camera has filmed at the pond is this jackdaw. You can tell it's a jackdaw by the light grey patch around its head and that unmistakable pale blue eye. And in fact, that wasn't the only member of the Corvidae family to visit the pond. One morning, I captured this crow just wandering around and even taking a bath before perching itself on one of the rocks that I had placed in the previous episode. It was really great to see. I don't really see that many crows in my garden. I see them flying around, but to actually stop by the pond was a really great sight and something that I wasn't expecting to see, as this was pretty much the only day that I have actually filmed a crow wandering around the pond. Maybe once before, but very briefly. This crow actually stayed around for a couple of hours, so he really made the most of those baths and just wandering around, foraging for food wherever it could find it. Now, crows are actually highly intelligent birds. They're slightly larger than their cousins, the jackdaws, and they have an all-black coat which separates them from the two. They're slightly smaller than their other cousin, the raven, but overall a very impressive bird and one that is widespread across the UK and much of the world. But it's actually another member of the crow family that has become one of my personal favourites over the years, and that is the magpie. Now, as seen in my previous videos, the magpie had occasionally visited the pond but wasn't a frequent visitor, until this point when 2 magpies spent most of the morning bathing and foraging around the pond, continuously stepping into the water and then shaking themselves off before carrying on. The whole thing occurred over a few hours, and this is just a sample of some of the footage that I captured on my trail camera. And much like crows, magpies are also a highly intelligent bird. They have this black and white plumage, which also contains some really long tail feathers. And amongst the tail feathers and on the tips of their wings, they have this kind of iridescent sheen that shines between a purple and green tone. They really make a very striking bird, and there aren't really any other birds that compare to it in the UK. As you can probably tell, magpies are of a similar size to the carrion crow and slightly larger than their cousins, the jackdaws. Magpies will also switch roles between scavenger and predator, which has made them quite notorious around the world. They're well known for their problem-solving skills, intelligence, size, and striking pattern. Not everybody's favourite, but personally, they've become one of mine. And although highly noisy at times, as seen in this clip, I've actually really enjoyed seeing them in my garden and hope that they continue to visit it well on into the future. And of course, I couldn't do a part 3 without including at least one clip of the local fox, seen here at just 9:30 PM. Such a cool sight. But here's something I haven't shown before. Can you see it yet? Look directly in the center of the screen. There it is. This is a mouse. I actually filmed this a little way away from the pond, but I thought it was interesting enough. I actually noticed a small hole in the garden and I stuck my camera beside it, not really knowing what to expect, until this little mouse popped out, and it was even joined by a friend. So not technically by the pond, but still interesting to see. And I'm glad that generally the wildlife in this area is doing well. I can also report that unfortunately we didn't have any birds nesting in the nest box that I put up this year. Maybe we'll have better luck next year, but for right now we'll just have to wait and see. However, one evening I was walking around my garden and I happened to notice these great tits frantically darting around in the trees, and that's because they had some babies with them. That's right, these great tits did go on to be a breeding pair. These may be the ones that we had previously seen visiting the next box. I can't be sure. However, it was really great to see and I had a lot of fun trying to film them. It's always great seeing them darting around with the little babies just waiting on a nearby perch, flapping their wings, desperately calling out to be fed. So I wish them all the best and hopefully we'll see them next year, returning to the garden and maybe even visiting the pond, we'll see. Whilst on the subject of babies, I also happened to notice this juvenile greenfinch occasionally visit the pond. It's really cool to see. As I mentioned before, greenfinches have suffered heavily in recent years, so I wish this young one all the best and hopefully we'll be seeing more greenfinches at the pond. And finally, let's take one last look at that little baby robin. Now you may look at this baby and wonder how you can identify it as a robin, and that's because it's missing its typical red breast. But this is common in a lot of young birds. You see, the camouflage plumage, like this speckled chest, actually helps the birds hide from predators until reaching adulthood. Think of it as kind of a helping hand in allowing the baby to progress and mature without that constant threat of being seen. Who doesn't love a robin? They're one of the UK's favourite birds, and I can definitely see why. I hope you've enjoyed this video, and please subscribe for future videos. Stay tuned as there will be plenty more pond updates in the future. But for right now, that's it. Hope you've enjoyed it. Thank you.